Let's talk about Akkan G3 playing as support. How to get Radiant, how to steal MVP from your DPSs. So battle items, you take Potion, and if you're progging, I guess you go for Time Stop. Although it's very hard to find Time Stop situations. So I don't know, maybe like you try taking Time Stop initially, and then like soon enough you should switch over to Stimulant. Uh, Sacred Bomb or Charm. I kind of recommend Sacred Bomb because you can bring 5 stacks of it instead of 3, and you can throw it at a distance, especially on Bard because you don't have cleanses, and like the ability to throw a cleanse at a distance can prove to be very helpful in a Con Gate 3 where someone might be petrified, CC'd, and a con goes over to them for the next slice, and you need to free them, and they might be at the other side of the map. So Sacred Bomb very good here. The problem with Charm too, apart from it having only 3 charges, is that it might cleanse the poison instead of the CC. It's kind of inconsistent in that sense. Generally Sacred Bomb. And then 4th slot, Dark Bomb. Certain people take Corrosive for the zero line mech if you want to deal with that. But I guess it's not really necessary as long as you have enough party mates alive. Some people like to toss it on the Gate 4 destruction as well. But generally just rely on Dark Bomb. Like they'll take either Corrosive or Destruction Bomb, but yeah. Anyways, let's get to it. So on Bard, I do take that Rhythm Buckshot to deal with the sudden counters. You can definitely go for a non-buckshot setup, but it will be very difficult to deal with the counters if that's the case. It's just best if you can bring Rhythm Buckshot. In case of Bard, Paladin you always have at least one blue skill. On Artist, take that counter. Whether it's one stroke or upper stroke. And then Rhapsody can be very helpful in a con. On Artist, Starry Night. On Paladin, you're always taking Godsent anyways. And so here you can see me with Sacred Bomb, Stimulant, and Dark Bomb. Let's get to it. So when you begin, he always goes into the air and then he's gonna strike downwards. You want to get hit by that. Like somebody has to get hit by that in order to trigger the second strike. Otherwise, he does this. What you call it? Let's call it merry-go-rounds. Like he turns away and that flings everyone into the air. So you don't want that. So what you do here is that you kind of try to hold position. He aggroes onto someone. It's generally the closest person when there's this moment where he aggroes onto to someone. It's kind of iffy, but like generally you want to get grouped up somewhere around here, and then watch him go in the air and then get out of it. So in this case, the Gunlancer took the initial hit, or not. I guess he got hit over here. Oh, actually, this guy got hit. Never mind. But yeah, you would tank it up using a super armor ability. In my case, what I like to do is either use Guardian Tune or Yongmeng at the moment when he hits, so I can tank the hit while not getting knocked to the ground. You can do it using any super armor ability. On Artist, you have Sun Sketch. On Paladin, you kind of have to spacebar it well. Or you turn on Holy Aura at the right timing. Anyways, that triggered the second strike down. See here? This strike down. This is the one you're looking for. And then the fight begins. So Yongmeng into Heavenly Tune, into Mark Skill. And then, of course, you want to know every one of his patterns. So that one was the strike down into backwards slash. And then the counter movements here are very, very sudden. just like in gate 2. So you have to notice that's a counter just from this motion right here. There are a few counter motions. They're like 3, I think. That's one of them. And if you fail the counters in Akkan gate 3, they can be pretty devastating. So as a support, you want to try to tend to them. And now, in this case, our party is very strong, so we phased to the initial stagger mech. You start at 200 lines, and this happens a bit after 190, I think. So in the case of normal Akkan, you don't get this big axe. This one is a one-shot, so you always have to be careful not to forget that it was there. So going back to it, you stand in ×3 +1 position. And like this is all a huge gauge building phase. So initially you use the Yongmeng when you went in, and then you're slowly building up. And when he phases to the center like that to signal that he's starting the stagger mech here, this is a big gauge building window. Just keep spamming skills initially. You block the lasers. There's a few seconds of window where you can do stagger, and you're trying to do stagger while building gauge there, and then you have to get out of the lasers. You do have like more time than than it looks. Like I did get out pretty early there, but I could have stayed a bit longer. And then of course the big axe, always remember its location, ping it if you can, danger ping twice, like here and here, to signal that it's gonna be there soon, because the big axe is always delayed. You only go 1 blue on Paladin for a con. You can do that. Although in a con, it's generally better if the team overall has a lot of stagger and destruction. Because in gate 4, you're rewarded for having tons of stagger. The stagger in gate 4 leads to damage increase for the entire party. Entire raid group. So you could take double blue skills here. Maybe in triple, but I'd say, nah, just double maybe. You have to block the lasers while doing stagger in the center. And because these lasers, if they stack up, they keep giving you this debuff, which makes you take increased damage. It hurts a lot. So if you can, try to apply shields on your DPSs. You might even want to awaken, although I don't like to do that. I like to just build gauge 3 bubbles. Like in this case, it would be a waste to use awakening, right? Because like this is a big gauge window, gauge building window. And so like around the time when it's about to end, you do want to like have Yongmeng and Heavenly Tune and Mark up so that DPS can start DPSing right away. So try to shield your party mates if you can. On Bard is kind of more difficult, right? Because like if you didn't bring Rhapsody, you can't really shield like the people opposite from you. On Artist and Paladin, though, it's way easier. On Artist, you have Sprinkle. On Paladin, you have Holy Protection and Godsend Law. And then one thing about this phase is if your party is lacking stagger, you might have to get out twice. In this case, we have a Gunlancer, so we can get it after the first big axe. Like after getting out of it once. But in certain cases, your party overall does not have enough stagger, so like you might have to cut it when you're almost done. And you want to do that because if the moment you stagger coincides with when the small axes start appearing, then it ruins the damage window that you have right after you finish the stagger. So in that case, I guess the party lead, the raid lead, pings danger on the floor, signal that everyone should get out of the lasers, and then go back in once the small axes are gone. And then one additional tip is regarding the big axe that happens over here. So like during this phase, there's one big additional axe that you'll be dealt. And sometimes it crosses over here or here. The thing you want to be mindful of is someone needs to block that laser. But in the case that the laser, the axe is positioned over here, sometimes less experienced people will just get out of the way and not block the laser. No, you want to block the laser because that's how you get stagger in. So one person should move backwards following this laser, like move over here if needed, and keep blocking the laser so that other people can keep dishing out the stagger. And yes, here, Gate 3 is where you're immensely rewarded for having stagger bots in your party. That one stagger bot who also acts as a janitor in a lot of cases is very immensely helpful. That's right. Like, if you have a stagger bot, you can finish this really quickly. The difference between having a stagger bot and not is, so over here we do have a Gunlancer, so we did manage to shave off a lot of the stagger bar here. Like this, is pretty good. A lot of cases though, it will be like half of what it is right now, if you don't have enough stagger in the party, and you will have to wait. You have to go out of the lasers at least twice. I'm not sure if you have enough time to go get out a third time. I haven't seen that happen recently. But yeah. If you have a stagger Gunlancer, stagger bot in your party, then at this mark you will be like half done. And then like once you're outside of the lasers and then go back in, the stagger bot can finish it up very easily. And one thing you want to do if you do have a stagger bot like that, they tend to be head attackers, destroyers, and Gunlancers. There can be like weird ones out, like my stagger blade, support blade. That's generally not the case. But if you do have a destroyer or a Gunlancer, you want them to be at the head so that they can profit from the head attack 10%. So what you would do is, like say Gunlancer was party number 3, so they go to times 3+1 over here, but then they can't do the head attack. Then you like switch the numbers or something, switch positions, so that the Gunlancer can do stagger from over here, within the raid group. That you should try to sort that out. Make full use of the stagger. A lot of parties, prog parties, fail this mech during prog. The thing about Akkan is that a lot of these cooperative mechs happen early on in the raid. There's one over here. There's one at 160 lines. One at 140 lines, although that can technically be done by just 3 people. And so here, right after the stagger check is done, I've gathered up 3 bubbles from this gauge building opportunity. I use Yongmeng right before it's about to end. And then I keep dishing out that attack buff, that mark skill, and then I use Awakening here. I've been waiting for this moment. It's my first Awakening. Now Akkan Gate 3 is a very long raid. If you keep spamming your Awakening, you're actually not going to have enough at the end. So you have a bit more room to use it where it matters. Now, Janitor goes in. We're already on our 42 lines, although this is the 160 line mech. So we did manage to dish out a lot of damage during that damage window, and he gave us additional patterns too. Now, 160 line mech is another gauge building opportunity. So you want to be tanking the lasers that come from this side, and this side. So based on where Akkan is positioned, it's 7 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and 11 o'clock. You want to be tanking the lasers, and generally what people will do is use Inanna here. This is another laser where if you keep tanking it, you receive a lot of damage. This party was way too fast, so we don't have Inanna up at this moment, so these guys are just tanking it without Inanna, and you have to be careful when you do that. So what you want to do is you have that one guy who keeps tanking the laser instead of these people so that their debuff stacks can be refreshed. If you have to deal with multiple dozens of stacks, then it starts hurting a lot, even on supports. As a support here, in case your party took a long time between the initial stagger mech and this phase, maybe you have your awakening up, maybe you want to use it here. But never mind. You have Inanna up anyways. You'd be using Inanna if you're progging, because you wouldn't be pushing this fast. So it'll be okay. So what you want to do here is you run up to Akkan while tanking the laser over here. If you're a support, you can kind of tank both lasers too. So you'd be standing over here and you could try tanking both. There was a bug in the old days where if you tanked both lasers, they actually canceled each other out. I think they probably fixed that. But yeah, you go close to a con and you try to build gauge over here, because there's another damage window right after. If you tank a center and you happen to be in the trajectory of the purple laser over here, you get silenced, so that makes it so that you can't build gauge. You want to be careful about this purple line over here. And then damage window right after. And our Inanna just came out, so we used it here. I use a 2 bubble here because I think I missed some skills earlier. I thought I was close enough. I wasn't. Yeah, I missed 2 skills there. That's bad. It would have been a 3 bubble. But yeah, you want to run up close to him and just use all of your skills, gauge building skills there. Keep using them. Try to build that 3 bubble. Into attack buff, into mark skill renewal. And of course, because you have Inanna, you get healed back. That's a counter move. Always be on the lookout for those. Always on the back of your mind, you should be thinking about that counter move. You could do it any moment. You have to be ready for it mentally in order to deal with it, because it's very fast. You have to be ready to react to it just based on the pre-motion. And then the 140 line mech ensues. One tip over here is that, well, this is a huge damage phase. You're always applying mark and attack buff and all, trying to build that gauge. Over here, the moment he reappears in the center for 140 line mech is also a very short window for building gauge, actually. And you can also input some damage as DPS. So that's good to know. Some people are over there trying to fit in like 1 or 2 skills. So I could have done that as support, actually. I guess I was lazy. And then you wait for your statue to come out. This phase will be very janky when you're progging. This is very difficult when you're progging, because you have explosions, you have these patterns coming out from the statues, exploding, knocking people to the ground. You have these big axes that are coming, explosions every once in a while that deal damage to everyone. And then if you try to tank these lasers when the statue is still active, it can pretty much one-shot you within 1 second. You don't want to be standing in the trajectory of those lasers. I quickly move out of it like that. But yeah, when the statue is dark like this, if you get hit by those lasers, they hurt a lot. The safe spot to not get hit, or to get hit as least possible without having to move too much. Also, being able to dodge the axe is standing right behind the statue on the horizontal. So when it comes to 1 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 11 o'clock, you want to be standing behind the statue based on the center position. Behind the statue on the horizontal. Because the axes always travel on the horizontal. So by standing in between these axe trajectories over here, right here, or on the left of that statue over there, you will be able to dodge these lasers. And standing behind the statues allows you to get hit less by the lasers. Because when they turn like this, they will hit people. Like if you're standing over here, you get at least momentarily hit by them. They can hurt a lot. And that's what a lot of people die from. They just are not aware that a laser is coming out from a newly made statue, for instance. And they just tank it and die. Like you pretty much die within a second. Yeah, right after is somewhat of a damage phase, but the problem here is that after like how much time is it actually? I've never timed it. So this is where you can start to doing damage on him. So 11:01. Let's see when he wakes up. And when he turns red, or like when he starts slashing and then he turns red, he's DR'd. So here you actually have a 10-second damage window. Never timed it like that. So it's 10 seconds, and then he's DR'd for like 5 seconds. And then he's damageable again. Now the problem with this is that sometimes he phases right after into either the slime tendies mech or the Loaki mech, the ghost mech. In which case, you can't do damage on him. So if you are to Yongmeng, right there, that'll be a big waste of a Yongmeng. Those mechs, I think the slime one is time-based. So when you're progging this, you will see the slime mech appearing at a pretty regular time. Usually it's right after the 100... Maybe it was before 160 line mech. Right before the 160 line mech. Or maybe it's the 141. Anyways, you're going to see it at a regular interval between your procs, because your party should be dishing out like decently like the same pace of damage. You're gonna see it at the same time, around the same lines. Now this is a very fast party though. Maybe this is not a good example, but so in this case I'm just chilling because there's only a 10-second damage window. If you have a 2 bubble, you could fit it in there, but it's okay to just save your bubbles. If you have 3, it's kind of a waste because, yeah, he only gives you a 10-second damage window, so you'd be wasting the remaining 5 seconds. Now maybe you use Yongmeng right here, as long as you're sure that it's not going to be a slime mech right after. In the old days, we used to wait out for the slime pattern, see it before he awakens, I guess. He changes form. So now he's like semi-enraged and his patterns become stronger. Especially as slime mech becomes stronger. What we used to do is we would wait it out for a slime pattern to happen initially, because then the slime mech is not as menacing as it is when he reaches this phase. But yeah, you don't want a Yongmeng during the slime phase because you should primarily be dealing with the slime. Your party would be all over the map trying to deal with the tendies and the slime. Anyways, from after the 140 line mech, it's just damage and dealing with a very angry Akkan. Again, in this case, you can wait it out for after the DR. You can use a 2 bubble in case you have that for this damage window. And then if you do have 3 bubble after he ends DR, you want to make sure that it's a pattern that is damageable. The fight begins here. We're at 90 lines, 88 lines. But if you're progging, you will be at around 140, 130 maybe. So you need to watch out. From now on, all the patterns are pretty hurtful. Like that one just now, you need to be able to know how to avoid it if you can. So he aggro's onto someone. It's front, back, and then sight fart. So the best way to avoid this is, as long as you're not the aggro, you go to the side. If you're the aggro, you want to move far away from it. If you know that you're the aggro, you want to move far away from it so that his aggro locks. If you're not aggro, then you want to go to his side so that you don't get hit by the front, back patterns. And then before he does the side fart, you want to move either front or back of him. So you see here, everyone is away from his sides because this side fart hurts and gives you a lot of gauge. But gauge mostly. Now this is the grab pattern where you stab someone after like taking a step back, and then he moves forward and tries to launch onto someone. If someone gets grabbed by that, he gives you a stagger check during which he doesn't take damage. Generally, you don't want to get hit by that. If you do, if you're a DPS, definitely you want to save your damage skills for the small window it gives you right after. As support, it's like whatever. As long as you don't Yongmeng during that stagger phase, it's fine. In this case, you didn't stab anyone because the person moved out of it. Now I use Symphonia right there for a quick heal. This is a phase where it will generally not be okay just using Yongmengs, because you do take a lot of damage, and it's a pretty long fight. You want to balance out between Yongmengs and heals. Maybe if you're progging, maybe like something like 2 bubble damage and 1 bubble heal. Generally, if not 3 bubble damage, 1 bubble heal. You always want to be on the lookout for people who get CC'd by full gauge. Always try to toss Sacred Bomb or use Sacred Charm or use Cleanse if you're another support, in order to free your party mates so that they can avoid this neck slice. He does this one-man neck slices. And if you get caught in that while you're CC'd, you die. Anyone else who also steps in front will also die in that 180-degree radius. You want to be at his back. You want to locate his back. Oh, never the front. Never. Now, when he moves to the center and emits that green fog, that means he's going to do the slime tendies pattern. And there is a kind of cheese way to do it, but I won't talk about that here. It's actually I talk about it like either from his front or his back or his sides. You go to the very far end of that and slightly step to the left or right. There's a small safe space. I think it's still there. They did patch it at some point, because usually you could just go to the extremities of his front or back or sides, and you would just be safe all around that place. But now you have to. Last time I did that safe spot, it was slightly on the left or right. I guess the way to avoid it is, other guys will talk about this, but yeah, you move slightly away to the left or right from his sides and front back. And then you move in, but you have to be slightly on the outside. So not towards the center. You have to move outside, but you want to be, like, generally just choose a position either to his front or to his back. Just get used to that. Because you have the head attack indicators. So it should be easy enough to discern where the explosion is going to happen based on that indicator. You sidestep it and then you move in a bit far from him. And then you move in towards him. Because the third one is an outwards explosion. And immediately after this, your entire raid group should be looking for the slime. If you don't kill him fast enough, he keeps pooping green stuff all over the map, and it's very annoying. And then always be careful when you do kill him. After a few seconds, he's gonna explode that blue telegraph, and anyone who gets caught in that gets CC'd. Be careful of that, and that might lead into a neck slice too. Was that a counter? No, that was a stagger. Yeah, the stagger bar. That's one thing that if you do have a stagger bot outside can be helpful. Just doing a lot of stagger on him provides damage windows, because those are very hard to find here. Unless you're like pretty experienced, it's gonna be hard to find those damage windows. There are 3 definite damage windows is when he's doing the lasers. He teleports to a certain location and does lasers, and on his back is a pretty safe spot to do damage. Now, Akkan is very bad for head attackers, because a lot of the stuff, the dangerous stuff, he does on his head side. There's the goal here. So it started at 140 lines. And then there's no mechs to deal with here. Unless you count the black orbs, red orbs, blue orbs, and green orbs. If you count that as a mech. Not really, I guess. It's just a regular pattern. Yeah, he doesn't do big party mechs. It's just straight up fighting with his basic patterns. But his basic patterns are all very dangerous and hurtful. But yeah, you try to bring him down to 30 lines, and during this entire thing, you're just trying to build, gauge, and release, whether it's a heal or a Yongmeng identity buff, until you do manage to hit 30 lines, and then he fades to the center. Meanwhile, of course, the janitor is doing work on the bottom side, and if you're progging and you're in Discord, you want to talk it out with the janitor and ping him where the places that need cleaning. And maybe I can find a video of me doing janitor work too. That should be helpful. As a support, that will not matter to you, but I guess janitor info is pretty important. And yeah, I could talk about that. I could have talked about a lot of patterns here, but we can't see them because we pushed too fast in this party. But I'm pretty sure the other guide makers will deal with explaining those. This starts around the 30 line mech, and I'll talk about Ester timings too. There's 2 big strats, I guess, dealing with Akkan G3 in hard mode. But in this case, since we didn't use a second Ester, we're gonna use way here. And yeah, that's the hidden way interaction. When he's below 16 lines, you can use way at any moment to trigger this hidden Ester. And it just finishes him up for gate 3. And now we're ready to enter gate 4. Now, one thing about this phase is if you have 3 bubbles here, you can just spend it here so that your DPS can bring Akkan down. And then what I can talk about here is oh, he's so fast. So he has 3 big patterns he does. It's either a laser to the front, 2 lasers to his sides, or he does a 360 laser. And one thing about it is he always aggroes onto someone, and he's gonna chase that person as they try to avoid his head. Generally, because the psychology here for people is that they want to be at the back to be safe. Because as long as you stay at the back, nothing can hurt you. But if you're really experienced, what you can do is you try to determine whether you are the aggro, and then you just lock it. You just don't move. And this requires a lot of experience because you need to know when you need to get out. But yeah, try to hold the aggro if you can. And yeah, this will come with experience. And then move out, like join the others at the back. And then avoid whether it's a side laser, there's a front laser, or it's a 360 laser. There's a way to tell the difference between them, which one's going to happen, but I just never bothered because it's not too important. Because in the end, you're just safe at the back. And then, if your party is composed of goblins, what will happen here while you're doing the hidden way tech is they're going to try to dish out a bit more damage on him at the back. So see here too, you can't stand here if you're a front attacker. You can kind of do damage on the side. But yeah, there's a lot of things that put head attackers at a disadvantage here. And so this is another damage window in case there are goblins who want to profit from it, just for the DPS pie. Like this phase does not matter in terms of the whether you clear or not. The damage you do here does not matter, but it might influence DPS pie. So there are goblins who do try to do damage even here, even as ways trying to bring Akkan down to 0 lines. You have to face Akkan for the interaction, like Thyrane or from somewhere. I've never tried not facing him is the problem, but I think for the hidden Ester interactions, I do think they're a distance based. So as long as you cast them from a decent distance from Akkan, so within a set distance, then it will trigger. I've had cases happen when even though I was facing Akkan, the hidden Ester would not happen. So I'm guessing it's a distance based judgment. Anyways, here what you should be doing is trying to build bubbles for gate 4. So best case scenario, you're leaving this phase with 3 bubbles. Now, before we move to gate 4, Ester timings. So generally use 1 Ester here. So that's the 160 line mech. You try to build up gauge, Ester gauge, doing all this. And then you face over 160 line mech. And then you use Inanna right over here. So that these 3 guys can tank the lasers without much danger. And it also allows the janitor to refresh their gauge, like put it back to 0. Primarily it's for the janitor, really. This phase is okay as long as you keep switching between laser tankers. Like over here, see that person? See their health going down? Because nobody's switching it for them. Like over here, there's a lot of switching occurring, but over here, this person is hard stuck. Nobody taking their place instead. As long as you're switching, taking turns, tanking the laser, you're fine. You use one Inanna here. Remember that, it's the 169 mech. And then, if you're trying to use way for the hidden way for the 16 below 16 lines, what a lot of parties nowadays do is they just hold on the Ester usage until the hidden way. So the Ester will be filled up around the, I don't know, the 90 line point, 100 line, 90 line point. If you're pretty slow, in the case of this party, it should be up by, I don't know, 60 lines, maybe even lower. The question is whether you use an additional Ester at 100 lines, 90, 100 lines, which would then mean that you might have to DPS cut in order to use Hidden Way under 16 lines. The way I recommend you do it, especially when you're progging, is just use Inanna one more time at around the 100 line, 90 line mark. You can use it whenever, really. Whatever the pattern is, it doesn't really matter. What's important is that the janitor gets their gauge down to 0. So you kind of want to communicate with the janitor and ask them what the appropriate timing for them to get the Inanna would be great. Like around the time they're above 70% gauge, maybe that's a good time to use Inanna for them. That's one way to use it. Or you just use it whenever, because the janitor can always profit from having Inanna down there. And then the remainder of your party would be fighting Akkan on Inanna, so that would be a very decent damage window. It can be also used to make the slime tendies phase very easy. Or, yeah, basically every mech, but especially the slime tendies mech. Or the ghosts phase, the ghosts mech. So what happens if you use Ester gauge at around 100 to 90 lines is sometimes you'll have to DPS cut after you reach 30 lines. So you'd be hovering around 15 lines, not doing damage, waiting for that way bar to fill up. That might not happen in prog groups even after having used that second Inanna. But if you go a bit beyond that, people start getting a bit more experienced. Maybe you have to wait. But the way I think about it is you should not use the hidden way. You should use the second Inanna around 90, 100 lines and just not wait for way. If you do have it up, then sure, use it. But don't wait for it. Just bring Akkan down to 0 lines and then use Inanna to deal with the 0 line mech. Because as long as you have Inanna, you don't get knocked out of the platform. And you just dish out all the destruction skills that your party has. And even without destruction bomb or corrosive bomb, it's generally okay. Maybe if your party has very horrible destruction, maybe you want to have someone bring corrosive bomb, but I haven't seen a case where we didn't have enough destruction. As long as you have a lot of party mates alive, that is. Thyrane 0 times is fine on normal. I actually don't know too much about normal mode. Are there no explosions on the ground and you just do destruction? Is that what happens in normal mode? Because if that's the case, then yeah, Thirain all the way. One thing about Ester gauge, if you do use Inanna times 2 and then use the third Inanna at 0 lines, is generally you don't need to care about filling up the Ester gauge. If you're hitting 0 lines, you get half the Ester gauge back when you hit 0 lines mech. So if your gauge bar was at 50%, it's safe zone to enter the 0 line mech. You don't have to go into gate 4 afterwards. I'll talk about that too. There's like a cheese mech for that. I'm not sure if it still works. But... So yeah. After you bring it down to 0 here, gate 3. And because you've probably built gauge here, you should be at least 2 bubbles, maybe 3 going out of this. Thirain and time stop. Ooh, time stop. Who brings time stop here? Maybe if you're progging actually, but like if you use Inanna though, there's no reason at all to bring time stop in the first place because you have enough destruction. I guess though, if you have quite a few party members dead, actually might be the case where you want to use Thirain. But in that case, wouldn't you just wait for Way? And not deal with the 0 line mech at all? I don't know, it depends on what kind of Ester gauge you're looking at when you're at that phase. So how to do gate 4, which can be very intimidating at first. So when you go in initially, you have immunity. And when you get hit by that fog here, you do take like 1/3 gauge. But because of the immunity here, I don't absorb any gauge. My gauge bar doesn't go up. One thing to mention though is, okay, first of all, there's a very long cinematic here after gate 3 ends. And one thing we used to do is we just let the cinematic play because I do think it's still there as a feature. If you wait it out for the cinematic to play full, your Ester gauge fills up in the background. So when you enter gate 4, you will have much more Ester gauge than if you had skipped it. I don't think I heard that they patched that. But like nowadays, of course, we don't do that tech, so there's no way to find out for me. You guys will have to figure out for yourselves. So always have that one guy uncheck it, uncheck the auto skip, and always just play through this. Like this will matter when you're trying to get your first clear, right? Because that's very important. The first clear is always the hardest, so you want to maximize your chances. And yeah, this this cutscene tech might help you. So we all go in over here. Like when you're less experienced, you don't go in. You just wait it out at the very ends because you're trying to avoid the fog. But if you're experienced, you just go straight in. If you wiped in a previous run in gate 4, sometimes the immunity doesn't work and you do walk up to him, but you do end up getting gauge, but whatever, it's just 1/3. And then there's also a way to spacebar and avoid the fog giving you gauge. I might show it later in this run. There's like a very tight timing where you can spacebar to avoid getting gauge from the fog, even though you're sitting over here. But anyways, if you're doing this goblin strat though, you want to be you want to have eyes on your character because there will be some writings appearing on you in case you are in charge of the worm. If you have been dealt the worm. So 1 out of the 8 players will be dealt the worm here, and they will have to plant it in the corners on the lower left or the lower right, whichever. So in this case, you have this guy over here who has the worm. Let me show you. So if you get the writings, if you get the worm, you'll see green text appearing on your character. I don't know what it will be in English, but it didn't appear for me, so I know that I'm not the worm. This guy is. So you see this guy, he was trying to goblin, but he was dealt the worm, so now he's moving outwards. If you're trying to goblin and you're not attentive, then you'll end up planting the worm somewhere around here, and people will have to step on it and kill it. Which will be problematic in case you push too fast and hit 230 lines, and you don't have any worm to walk into to survive the wipe mech. Always be careful to have worm control, to have eyes on the worm. Now, over here, whenever the fog happens, one guy gets dealt the worm, and then these tentacles appear. 2 tentacles appear on the field. And whoever kills them gets this massive stagger buff. I think each stack was 75% increased stagger, and it stacks up to 6. I think. So if it's 75 times 6, is that like 450%? Yeah, it's insane levels of stagger increase. So generally, you should have your strongest stagger member on your team getting all the initial tentacles so that they can get all the stagger increases so that Akkan can be staggered very quickly. Now you have to be aware of all the patterns here. They're not difficult at all. Generally, the rule is wherever he places his hand is safe. And then there are additional moves like this one, and then the one he just did right before. This one. When he slams the ground with both fists, that means he's going to do a central grab. Now, anyone who's around this area will get grabbed, and he's going to vomit all over you, and you'll be at full gauge, and then he's going to slam you to the ground. Now, the area for this is very large, so you just want to stick to the corners, to the sides. Just hug the sides when this happens. Like, sometimes you'll be over here and you feel safe, but you aren't. You just try to hug the sides and corner. That's what I do over here. I move over to the sides and avoid the grab. Nobody got grabbed there. I would have liked to show you that. And then this one, yeah, a big ball of green poop in his mouth. He's going to do a horizontal slash around the center of this square platform. And it's going to be, it's going to extend a bit. So like up to here would explode. So you just want to hug upwards for this. How hard is it to kill the tentacle? I think they have roughly, I don't know, was it 10 million or 20 million HP? Something around that. So it's pretty much impossible to kill on a support. Might be closer to 20 million. Maybe it's 15? I forgot. Something between 10 and 20. And in this case, we have a Gunlancer in the party. I think they took the tentacle, so we got the initial stagger check pretty quickly. This is the immense power that stagger brings in Gate 4. You get these stagger checks very early in the fight, which boosts your party damage by 50%. The entire raid does 50% more damage. And you want to get that early on. Because that means you'll get the second stagger phase, stagger check soon enough. And then the third one too, if the raid extends to that point. Anyways, 230 lines. Now this is another raid where you have to juggle lines, kind of like in Gate 6 Brawl. Gate 5 and 6 Brawl. So you the big events happen around 230, around 180, and then around 130. Maybe it's close to 235 and 135. Those are the timings when you need to either enter a worm or you need to be knocked outside of the platform into the water in order to survive. So for the 230 line mech, you always go for the worm because there's no consistent way to get in the water. And now we did the stagger check, destruction check, and now we get 50% increased damage. See the bar going down? Like 300 lines, he begins with 300, but it's actually very easy once you get those stagger checks done. Because gate 3 was 200 lines. So when you enter this and you see 300 lines, it's like, how the hell are you going to deal with this? But it's actually very simple. You just do enough stagger, get that damage buff, and that 300 lines melts like butter. So now when he raises his two arms into the sky as if he's about to slam the ground pretty soon, you want to enter the worm collectively as a team. So you gather up near one of the worms if there are like more than one. You generally want to try and save the second worm if there is one. You want to gather up on one and then you want to enter it at the same time, like what we just did. So you always wait for other people, even if you arrive first. And then once you see everyone converged, then it's the safe time to enter. You do have more time than you think, than it seems. But yeah, that allows you to avoid this wipe mech. And then he always follows it up with these waves. And if you get hit by these waves, you enter the water, and that's very important to know. You think that's bad. That's actually good when you're dealing with the 130 line mech. Wipe mech. And then whenever he does front waves, he follows it up with this fog here. And not always. He often does. And then fog always means tentacles and worm. So one guy will have to place a worm and then get the stagger bot to deal with those tentacles. Or anyone can just get them, really. It's just best if you have the stagger bot or stagger strong guy get the tentacles. But it doesn't really matter as long as someone gets it. Is the person that kills it, or does it give an AoE stagger buff? No, it's the person that kills it. Now this is the water park phase. He does it at around 180 lines. And now water park. This part can be janky, and this is where, like, when we used to take time stop, a lot of people would just use time stop just to avoid getting knocked into the water. But as long as you know how to navigate through this, it's fine. You don't need time stop at all during this raid. So you constantly getting pulled towards the lower side of the platform. Like if you stop moving, you will get hurled into the lower side. And then if you're over there and you get hit by the waves, then you enter the water, which generally you don't want. Because you can only enter the water up to 3 times, is it? Be saved. So he either does these scratches or the lasers. And then he's gonna put yellow puddles that if you step on them, you get CC, then you get hurled to the other side, and then you will most likely enter the water. We're trying to move to avoid the yellow puddles, to avoid the scratch and lasers, to avoid the waves on the lower end of the platform, and then also if you have a safe saved up worm somewhere, you want to also avoid walking into that. So there's a lot of things you need to juggle here. And the laser mech can be kind of annoying, but it's very easy to tell where he's gonna use the laser on. Like right here, right? And the width of it is pretty big, pretty wide. But there's always a safe spot. Wherever it is. So like you'll have to adjust. Sometimes you have like a very small area, safe space between the waves and the laser where you can position yourself to not get knocked into the water, to not get lasered and hurled into the water by that too. Like in this case, I'm like juggling my space between. Over here too. Very nice. Oh, I get caught in the water though. The waves. I should have stayed a bit more up. Bit more. But it's okay, even if you go into water here. As long as you didn't go in the water before this, it's fine. And when you do enter the water, it's actually pretty good. If you do enter the water early on in the water park phase, you want to wait it out. Don't try to get out right away, because this is kind of like a free long time stop. As long as you're in the water, you're safe. Make full use of the time as long as the water park phase extends itself. And so here I'm just waiting it out, right? I could end it here, but I end it at the timing when the water park phase ends. But you want to be careful when you're doing that, of course. By the time you reach 7 seconds, you should be trying to get out. Sometimes you mess it up and then you just drown. So now, damage phase. After the water park ends, he will always deal you with this front wave. Now, it took like the Koreans a very long time to understand what you're supposed to do here. So he always gives us this mech because in case we manage to drop him down to below 130, 35, he will give us that wipe mech, the 135 line wipe mech. This is our saving grace in case we don't have worm. So he will always do this. And that's the way you get out of the wipe mech. You don't die from the wipe mech, even if you don't have a worm alive. So you get hit by this purposefully by standing at the edges of the bottom side, and then you go in the water. And then he'll do the wipe mech. And you can avoid it by waiting it out in the water. In this case, is he bugged or something? Wait, did he do the wipe mech? Did I miss it? Because he's supposed to do the wipe mech right after he does the front waves. That's weird. He should have done it. Unless I missed the second wipe mech there. We get a second stagger in. And that means our party does 100% extra damage. And it's like so fast at this point. You see the bars melting? And that's how to do it. Now, in terms of Ester timings, one way you can use it is to save it below so after the second wipe mech, you can use way to I think Wei chunks around like 50, 60 lines off him. And it's very useful if you use it on revived party mates. So those who are MC'd after dying, they come back to life. You can use Wei from one of the corners. So you want to have like all party mates gather up, all alive party mates gather up in one of the corners, and make it so that the Wei hits both Akkan and the revived party mates. So you'd like stand over here and aim it towards the left, and everyone should gather around here so that the MC people gather towards you. And that's how you would use the Wei. Now, the problem with using Wei, though, is sometimes he avoids it. He dodges it. So be wary of patterns where you think Wei would hit him and he would not be able to get out of it. Now, the second way to use it is using the hidden Inanna in Gate 4. So whenever he does the white mechs at 230 and 130, you can use Inanna to not have to go inside a worm. And it will trigger this cutscene, like kind of like a cutscene. So this hidden Inanna, and when it ends, his stagger check will be done, so he will reveal a destruction check, and once you're done with that, you get 50% or 100% extra damage. It's one way to do it. It's not too feasible. There's not a good situations where you would use the hidden and nana because of the nature of how the gauge fills up, but it's good to know. Sometimes you might have to use it. Very extreme cases. Generally, use Wei if you have to. And don't use Dire Rain here. He barely does anything. For some reason. He barely does damage. Wei is the way to go. In Gate 4. And then in terms of support gauge, because this is all about how to Goblin as a support. Let's go back. So if you entered with 2 bubbles or 3 bubbles here, you can toss it right away. And then you'll have time to build it back up. Until the stagger check happens. So here I use Yongmeng after allowing my DPSs to get some time to position themselves to deal with the tentacles and all. I use Yongmeng and Heavenly Tune here. Wow, where did I aim my sound shock there? Puddle positioning will be kind of difficult. Sometimes you'll have DPSs doing damage over here, sometimes over here. And then best case scenario, he does one of these patterns where people just gather up at one hand. So you can use puddle on all 3 people. But yeah, sometimes you'll have to space it out. Sometimes you have hitmasters just attacking from the center. And then you place puddle right beneath them. Can be kind of tricky. Just try to plant it below as many DPS as you can. And then this is a big damage window here after the destruction phase is done, after stagger check is done. You want to use at least 2 bubbles for this. In this case, I was not ready for it because the Gunlancer did an insane amount of stagger there. Pushed it really fast. I do give them Yongmeng a bit delayed, but right after the destruction, generally you want to be able to give them Yongmeng. So that they can do damage. Or the other way to go about it is you give them Yongmeng right here. But this part is tricky because you keep getting pushed backwards. It's kind of hard to do damage, especially for entropy classes. And especially for barrage artillerists because you get pushed back even in your chair. If you're really good, you can kind of build gauge here. It's very difficult though, because you constantly, because of gravity, you get pulled towards the lower end of the platform. The very least you can do though is just hit in 1 basic attack. So here, yeah, you see me, I'm trying to build a bit of gauge, but I get pulled into the water like that. So generally don't try to do that. But at least one thing you can do is just fit in 1 basic attack so you can proc Yearning to help your DPSs navigate around the platform during this. And then, after Water Park phase has ended, there's another front wave. And you can try to give them Yongmeng here, or you can wait it out after you see a damage window. Another front wave. It is very difficult to do anything here. Now, that's the second stagger check that occurred. And you want to be able to give Yongmeng right after those stagger checks. And that's why I brought Awakening Pot. So that for at least one of them, I will be able to use Stimulant, not Awakening Pot. Stimulant in order to give them 3 bubble for at least one of those stagger checks. Because it's a big damage window here. There's no real need for a time stop in this entire gate. Like, there's no good angle for it. So I do recommend Awakening, Stimulant, unless you're, progging and you just want that ease of mind there. So yeah, Radiant timings, not Radiant. Yongmeng timings, all in all. And if you see the MVP screen here, before I talk about that, it's me. Is out of steal MVP from your DPS is 101. 17% radiant right there. So again, give up a 3 bubble initially, and then you have that 188 line-ish. Stagger mech. You can use a heal here perhaps, and this is a big gauge building phase. You want to use a 3 bubble right after. Where DPS to do damage right after the stag phase. So you keep building gauge, give them at least a 2 bubble, if not a 3. The longer the stagger check lasts, though, the better for your Yongmengs. Because it allows you to get a definite 3 bubble. And then you can use 1 awakening over here. Again, you can use like a 2 bubble, maybe even 3 depending on how fast you push. Because you know that there's going to be a gauge building phase during the 160 line mech. So you can toss all your bubbles before entering it. Even here, you can do a bit of damage. So if your DPSs do have Yongmeng, like in this case, they can make use of it here. If they're trying to greed like this Reaper. I think it's a Reaper. It's doing here. Yeah. And important here is to build gauge during this phase. As support, you want to be tanking those lasers and trying to build gauge, and then trying to apply shield in case you're not using Inanna to everyone in your party who's trying to block it alongside you. And then use a 2 bubble or 3 bubble right here. And then you're headed towards the 140 line mech, which isn't really a big gauge building phase. So you want to make try to build some bubbles here and not use them, just save them. And then you work around that 140 line mech. And if you have 2 bubbles here, you can use it right away. If you have 3, I'd hold on to it and see what kind of pattern is right after. But yeah, after the DR ends here, always be careful to see if he phases into a slime tendies mech, because you can't DPS through that, so it'd be a waste of a Yongmeng. Just be wary. Just make sure that he does normal patterns instead of the slime tendies, and then use your Yongmeng. And then here you can just keep using Awakening and toss your bubbles whenever you see fit until it reaches 30 lines. There's no big rule here. You just adapt to the situation. You just keep doing that. until it reaches 30 lines. You can also toss Yongmengs and Awakenings during this 30 line mech. And then here too is a damage window. You can like whisper to your party mates that they should damage through this so that they can do damage and take a bigger portion of the DPS pie so that you can get radiant. And then, like, entering this, you should have at least 2 or 3 bubbles, because even if you tossed a Yongmeng here, you could have built some gauge by attacking a con over here. So after you see the board getting cleaned, yeah, you can still build gauge while waiting for your party mates to get in position. And then you use Yongmeng, Heavily Tuned, somehow I missed that sound shock. And then you're building gauge, waiting for that first stagger check. You can use Awakening. Like, this stagger check was really fast. Unfortunate for me. So I use a 2 bubble here. I keep applying attack buffs and mark skill, but then he gives us that white mech. Oh, one thing I didn't mention here is if you can, try to shield your party mates up here, because like while they're entering the worm, they do take a bit of damage. Maybe I gave them Guardian Tune beforehand, and that's the shield from that. And then you can try to give them Yongmeng here, but it will be kind of difficult to DPS through this. Maybe you want to wait for the next pattern. Unless it's the water park like it is in this case. In that case, you would just wait. Wait it out, and then like right after the water park, he gives you another front wave like this. It's just difficult to DPS through. Maybe you look for a better angle than this. Another front wave over here. Yeah, stagger check. You want to be able to use Awakening Pot if you have that, or prepare a 2-3 bubble for that. In this case, you see me toss right after I see that stagger check happen, that destruction check. I toss a heal, and then I use a stimulant, and then I use a 3 bubble there. Heal into Awakening Pot, into stimulant, into 3 bubble, into attack buff and mark. And then he's just dead like that. And that's the timeline regarding identity usage, which is very important on your way to get Radiant. Being able to plan out your identity usage to a certain degree, you would have to adjust as the raid goes on, and it would depend on how fast your party pushes. But a very important aspect of being a good support is being able to design the way you're gonna use your awakenings and identities. So yeah, that's for Bard, and I might also look into Artist and Paladin gameplay.